Hey everyone, before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel. This one's going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The wind was icy that night in Copenhagen, cutting through the narrow streets like shards of glass. I sat on the stone steps outside my apartment building, jacket pulled tight around me, watching the last street lights flicker over the cobblestones. A week earlier, Emma had kicked me out of our bed. Not just a fight, not just an argument, but cold, deliberate, the kind of dismissal that leaves a man hollow and furious all at once. She had laughed as she slammed the door, the sound echoing down the hallway like a mocking bell. "You don't understand me," she said. "Maybe some space will make you see that." Space? She had no idea. I wandered the streets that first night. Rain dripping from my hair, the neon glow of cafes reflecting on puddles. A storm was rolling in from the Baltic. My mind, however, was calmer than it had been in months. Emma had always thought I lacked backbone, that my patience was weakness. That week of exile proved otherwise. It started with observation. Emma's routine was predictable. Morning yoga, espresso at the corner cafe, weekly dinners with her mother, late nights at the office. Her patterns were threads I could pull. I remembered my father, a man who had been betrayed by my mother's family decades earlier over an inheritance in Aarhus. He had taught me patience, the slow burn of careful revenge, the art of watching someone assume they were untouchable. I rented a small flat on the outskirts of the city, furnished sparsely, nondescript. It overlooked the canal, where ferries cut through fog and silence alike. From there, I began to watch, to plan, to gather. I found out who she met, what she spent, which colleagues she trusted, and which she manipulated. Emma's confidence, once charming, became arrogance, and arrogance can be exploited. The first move was subtle. A few emails, slightly misdirected, leading her to believe an important project had been delayed. Her boss noticed errors she hadn't made, little mistakes that no one could trace to her. She panicked, blaming me in her private thoughts, though I hadn't touched a single document. Next, I approached someone I knew she respected, her sister Ingrid. I didn't lie. I only showed her the cracks she refused to see. Subtle inconsistencies in Emma's office claims, financial oversights, patterns of neglect toward family and friends. Ingrid's concern was genuine. She hadn't realized how much Emma's pride had grown into recklessness. I spent nights walking Copenhagen's bridges, the cold biting, planning my next steps. My mother had called once, voice trembling. "You're too patient," she said. "Don't let her think she's winning." "I'm not," I whispered to the wind. By the fifth day, Emma's isolation began to take form. Invitations from friends went unanswered. Minor work crises escalated, and small betrayals she had ignored in others' lives returned to her doorstep. She called me one night, voice tight, seeking comfort. I didn't answer. Then, the breakthrough, a financial misstep, small but traceable, linked to a business partner she trusted implicitly. I anonymously tipped the auditor. Within hours, a quiet investigation began. Emma, frantic, couldn't connect the dots. I stayed hidden, yet close enough to observe the unraveling. The following week, she began reaching out to her mother, colleagues, even me indirectly, begging for explanations she could not articulate. Pride, once her armor, now became her torment. And I remained in the shadows, a presence she could not see but could feel in every failed plan, every lost opportunity. Finally, I decided the climax was near. I orchestrated a meeting in a quaint cafe by Nyhavn, under the guise of reconciliation. Emma arrived first, eyes scanning, anxiety evident despite her attempts at composure. I entered calmly, sat down, and let the silence stretch. "You've been distant," she said, voice low, almost pleading. I smiled, not cruelly, but knowingly. "I've been where I needed to be," I said, observing, waiting, understanding. Her eyes widened as realization began to dawn. The subtle manipulations, the failures she had endured, the whispers of concern from friends and family, it all converged in her mind. She tried to recover, to mask it with anger, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you wanted space," I replied softly. You wanted to think I would always be here, passive. But some lessons can only be learned when the consequences arrive. Tears formed. Pride and fear wrestled visibly across her face. She didn't argue. She didn't protest. She only began to beg, quietly, desperately, for understanding, for reconciliation, for a way back into a life she had taken for granted. I listened, calm, letting her words land fully. Emma's humility, once impossible, now felt fragile, earned through weeks of her own unraveling. It was justice of a sort, not punishment in the traditional sense, but the revelation of truth, the mirror she had refused to see in herself. Weeks later, our lives settled into a new rhythm. Emma changed, slowly, tentatively, learning respect not from fear, but from the experience she could no longer deny. Our relationship, once fractured, began the slow process of rebuilding. The bed she had cast me from became a shared space again. Though now, carefully, cautiously, trust had to be re-earned. I walked along the canal one evening, lights reflecting off the water like molten gold, feeling the weight of history lift. The city around me was alive with noise and life, but I felt a quiet clarity I hadn't known in years. Revenge, I realized, was never about vengeance for its own sake. It was about equilibrium, restoring balance to a world that had tilted too far toward arrogance and neglect. Emma approached later, timidly, offering a hand. I took it, not as a sign of weakness, but as acknowledgement. The past could not be erased, but its lessons could shape the future. From that night on, I understood something essential. Power lies not in anger, but in patience, in observation, in the careful orchestration of truth. And when it is revealed, even the proudest must bow, not just to justice, but to clarity. Copenhagen's fog rolled in again, gentle now, as though the city itself had witnessed the lessons delivered and found peace. I watched the lights dance over the water, a quiet smile forming. Some betrayals demand reckoning, some betrayals teach, and some, like this one, redefine the very meaning of trust and resilience. And in that clarity, I finally rested.